Welcome to the Sleep Story Haven, your peaceful sanctuary where the whispers of ancient forests meet the gentle rhythm of moonlit shores. Here, time slows to the rhythm of your breathing. Worries dissolve like mist, and your mind finds the peace it's been seeking. Each story is crafted to guide you through enchanted landscapes and tranquil moments, designed to quiet your thoughts and prepare your spirit for deep, restorative sleep. So find your most comfortable position, close your eyes, and let tonight's gentle tale carry you to the peaceful dreams that await. Welcome to your Sleep Story Haven. Take a deep breath and let our story begin. Olive Grove under Starlight. Chapter 1: The Path to Silver Light. Elena walked slowly along the dusty path that wound its way through the Mediterranean hillside. Her feet finding their own rhythm against the worn stones that had been smoothed by countless footsteps over countless years. The day had been long, filled with the kind of restless energy that comes from too much thinking, too much planning, too much of everything that pulls the mind away from the simple pleasure of being present in the world. Now, as the sun began its gentle descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in soft washes of amber and rose, she felt the first stirrings of peace beginning to settle into her shoulders, releasing the tension she had carried there like a familiar burden. The path curved gently upward, following the natural contours of the land. And with each step, Elena felt herself moving not just through space, but through time itself, as if she were walking backward through the layers of her own urgency, peeling them away like the petals of a flower opening in reverse. The air grew softer here, carrying with it the mingled scents of wild herbs, rosemary and thyme, oregano and sage, that grew in abundance along the stone walls that lined the ancient terraces. These were plants that had learned to thrive in this blessed land, their roots deep in soil that had been tended by human hands for thousands of years, their leaves holding the memory of countless seasons of sun and rain, wind and stillness. As she walked, Elena became aware of a subtle shift in the quality of light around her. The harsh brightness of midday had softened into something more golden, more forgiving, and she could feel her eyes relaxing, no longer needing to squint against the glare, but instead opening wider to take in the gentle beauty that surrounded her. The landscape here was painted in colors that seemed to come from an artist's palette, designed specifically for peace. The soft gray-green of olive leaves, the warm terracotta of ancient stones, the pale gold of dried grasses that swayed gently in the evening breeze like nature's own prayer flags. The path began to level out as it approached the crest of the hill, and Elena could sense, rather than see, that something special lay ahead. There was a quality to the air here, a sense of anticipation that was not anxious, but deeply welcoming, as if the land itself were preparing to share a secret that had been kept safe for generations. She paused for a moment, allowing herself to really breathe, drawing the clean, herb-scented air deep into her lungs, and feeling it spread through her body like a gentle wave of calm. When she crested the hill, Elena felt her breath catch, not with surprise, but with recognition, as if some part of her had always known this place existed and had been quietly calling her here. Before her stretched an ancient olive grove, its trees arranged in perfect rows that seemed to follow the natural rhythm of the land itself. These were not young trees, planted in neat commercial rows, but ancient beings that had stood in this place for centuries, their trunks thick and gnarled with age, their bark deeply furrowed with the lines of countless seasons. The trees stood like gentle sentinels in the fading light, their silver-green leaves catching the last rays of the sun and transforming them into something that seemed almost magical. Each leaf was like a tiny mirror, reflecting not just light, but something deeper, peace itself, perhaps, or the accumulated wisdom of all the quiet moments these trees had witnessed. The grove stretched away in all directions, creating a natural cathedral where the sky formed a vast blue dome overhead, and the trees served as living pillars, their branches reaching upward in gestures of perpetual prayer. Elena walked slowly into the grove, feeling immediately enveloped by a sense of sanctuary that was unlike anything she had experienced before. The trees seemed to welcome her, their branches swaying gently in the evening breeze, as if nodding in recognition of her need for peace. The ground beneath her feet was soft with the accumulation of years of fallen leaves, creating a natural carpet that cushioned each step and whispered softly as she moved through it. As she walked deeper into the grove, Elena began to notice the sounds that filled this sacred space. There was the gentle whisper of leaves moving against each other, a sound so soft and constant that it seemed to create its own kind of music, not the jarring cacophony of the modern world, but something deeper and more primal, a rhythm that matched the beating of her own heart. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the gentle trickle of water over stones and the soft cooing of doves that had made their homes in the ancient branches. The evening light was changing now, growing softer and more golden with each passing moment. And Elena realized that she had arrived at exactly the right time. This was the hour when day begins its gentle transformation into night, when the harsh edges of the world soften and everything becomes more dreamlike, more forgiving. The olive trees seemed to glow in this light, their silver leaves creating a canopy that filtered the sun's rays into something that felt almost liquid. as if she were walking through golden honey rather than mere air. She found herself drawn to one particular tree that stood slightly apart from the others, its trunk even more ancient and gnarled than the rest, its branches spreading wide to create a natural shelter. This tree seemed to call to her, not with words, but with a presence that felt both welcoming and deeply familiar, as if she had known it in dreams or in some other lifetime. Elena approached slowly, reverently, feeling as if she were being invited to join a conversation that had been going on for centuries. When she reached the tree, she placed her hand gently against its bark, feeling the deep furrows and ridges that spoke of countless seasons of growth and endurance. The bark was warm from the sun, and she could almost feel the slow, steady pulse of life within the ancient wood. This tree had stood here through wars and peace, through seasons of plenty and seasons of want, through the coming and going of countless human lives. And yet it remained unchanged in its essential nature, rooted and present and utterly at peace with its place in the world. Elena settled herself at the base of the tree, leaning back against its sturdy trunk and feeling immediately supported, held in a way that she had forgotten was possible. The tree seemed to enfold her in its ancient embrace, its roots extending deep into the earth below, connecting her to something vast and stable and enduring. Above her, the branches formed a natural canopy, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze and creating patterns of light and shadow that danced across her face like gentle fingers. As she sat there, Elena felt the last of her urgency beginning to drain away, replaced by something deeper and more nourishing. The tree's presence was like a steady hand on her shoulder, reminding her that there was no need to hurry, no need to be anywhere other than exactly where she was. Time seemed to slow and stretch here, becoming something more liquid and forgiving, measured not by the ticking of clocks, but by the gentle rhythm of breathing, the slow dance of leaves in the breeze, the gradual shift of light across the ancient stones. The sun was lower now, casting longer shadows between the trees and painting the grove in even deeper shades of gold and amber. Elena could feel the temperature beginning to drop slightly, the intense heat of the day giving way to the gentle coolness of evening. This was the time of day she had always loved best, when the world seemed to exhale and settle into itself, when the busy energy of daylight transformed into something more contemplative and still. As she sat beneath the ancient olive tree, Elena began to understand that she had not simply found a place to rest, but had discovered something far more precious, a sanctuary that existed not just in the physical world, but in some deeper realm of peace and healing. This grove had been waiting for her. She realized waiting with the infinite patience of growing things, ready to offer its gifts to anyone who approached with an open heart and a willingness to receive. The realization filled her with a sense of gratitude so profound that it brought tears to her eyes, not tears of sadness, but tears of recognition, of coming home to something she had not even known she was missing. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to sink deeper into the tree's embrace, feeling her breathing slow and deepen, feeling her heart rate settle into the same steady rhythm as the life force pulsing through the ancient wood behind her. When she opened her eyes again, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky above, their light soft and welcoming in the gathering dusk. Elena smiled, understanding that her journey was just beginning, that this grove held mysteries and gifts that would unfold slowly, gently, in the days and nights to come. For now, it was enough to simply be here, to rest in the embrace of the ancient olive tree, and allow herself to remember what it felt like to be truly, deeply at peace. The night air was beginning to carry new scents now, the cool dampness that rises from the earth as the sun sets, the sweet fragrance of night-blooming flowers, the clean smell of dew beginning to form on the grass. Elena breathed deeply, drawing these gifts of the evening into her lungs and feeling them spread through her body like a gentle blessing. Above her, the olive leaves continued their soft conversation with the breeze, their whispered stories of centuries past beginning to weave themselves into her dreams. Chapter 2: Ancient Whispers in Silver Leaves. As the last light of day faded into the deep blue of evening, Elena found herself entering a state of awareness that felt both completely natural and utterly extraordinary. The transition from day to night in the olive grove was not the abrupt change she was accustomed to in the city, where electric lights banished darkness and the rhythms of nature were forgotten. Here, the transformation was gradual and gentle, like watching a flower open in slow motion, each moment bringing new subtleties of color and sensation. The olive trees around her seemed to come alive in a different way as darkness approached. During the day, they had been beautiful but static, like ancient sculptures placed thoughtfully in a sacred garden. Now, as the evening breeze grew stronger and cooler, they began to move with a grace that was almost dance-like, their branches swaying in patterns that seemed both random and purposeful, as if they were responding to music only they could hear. Elena had always been someone who noticed things. The way light fell across a room, the particular quality of silence in different places, the subtle changes in people's expressions that revealed their inner states. But here, beneath the ancient olive tree, her awareness seemed to expand beyond anything she had experienced before. She could feel the individual movements of leaves above her head, could sense the way the breeze carried different scents from different directions, could almost hear the slow, patient conversations that the trees seemed to be having with each other across the grove. The silver leaves of the olive trees were particularly mesmerizing in the evening light. Each leaf was perfectly designed by nature to catch and hold light. Its surface slightly fuzzy and pale on the underside, deep green and glossy on top. As the breeze moved through the branches, the leaves turned and fluttered, creating an ever-changing display of silver and green that was hypnotic in its beauty. Elena found herself watching this natural light show with the same fascination she might have felt watching flames dance in a fireplace, her mind growing quieter and more still with each passing moment. There was something about the movement of the olive leaves that seemed to have a direct effect on her nervous system, as if the gentle rustling sound they made was precisely calibrated to induce a state of deep relaxation. Scientists might explain this as the effect of pink noise, the kind of random, natural sound that human brains find soothing. But Elena experienced it as something far more mystical. It was as if the trees were singing her a lullaby, their ancient voices blending together in a chorus that spoke directly to the deepest parts of her being. As she sat and listened, Elena began to imagine that she could understand the language the trees were speaking. It was not made of words, but of something deeper and more primal, the communication of living things that had learned to exist in perfect harmony with their environment. The olive trees had stories to tell, she realized, stories that stretched back through centuries of human history, stories of seasons and storms, of abundance and scarcity, of the countless people who had walked among them seeking shade, shelter, and the simple peace that comes from being in the presence of ancient wisdom. One story seemed to emerge more clearly than the others, carried on the evening breeze, and whispered through the silver leaves in a voice that was somehow both ancient and eternally present. It was the story of a young woman who had lived here many centuries ago. During a time when the grove was part of a small monastery where monks came to pray and tend the trees and find solace from the troubles of the world. The woman's name had been Sophia, and she had been a healer, one of those rare individuals who possessed an intuitive understanding of the connection between plants and human well-being. She had spent her days walking among the olive trees, gathering herbs and tending to the sick. But her evenings were reserved for something even more precious: the practice of simply being present with the trees, allowing their ancient wisdom to flow through her like water through a dry riverbed. Elena could almost see her now, this woman from centuries past, moving gracefully through the grove in the fading light, her hands gentle as she touched the bark of the trees, her eyes bright with the kind of peace that comes from understanding one's true place in the world. Sophia had discovered what Elena was beginning to understand now, that the olive grove was not just a collection of trees, but a living temple, a place where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds grew thin and permeable. As the story continued to unfold in Elena's imagination, she learned that Sophia had developed a particular relationship with the tree beneath which Elena now sat. This ancient olive, already centuries old when Sophia first encountered it, had become her teacher and her sanctuary, the place where she came to remember who she truly was beneath all the roles and responsibilities that life had given her. Night after night, Sophia would sit beneath this same tree, learning to listen not just with her ears, but with her entire being, allowing the tree's deep rootedness to become her own, allowing its patient endurance to teach her about the kinds of strength that grow slowly and last forever. The tree had taught her that true healing came not from fighting against pain or difficulty, but from creating space for transformation, from learning to hold both joy and sorrow with equal grace, from understanding that everything in life, like everything in nature, moved in cycles of growth and rest, expansion and contraction, activity and deep, restorative peace. Elena felt a profound sense of connection to this woman from the past, this kindred spirit who had found the same sanctuary and learned the same lessons that were now being offered to her. It was as if Sophia's presence still lingered in the grove, not as a ghost, but as a living blessing, a reminder that the search for peace and healing was not a modern invention, but an ancient human need that had been answered by sacred places like this one for thousands of years. The stars were becoming brighter now as the sky darkened, and Elena could see why ancient navigators had used them as guides. Each star seemed to pulse with its own inner light, creating patterns across the heavens that were both beautiful and mysteriously meaningful. The olive trees framed her view of the sky perfectly, their branches creating a natural window through which she could observe the slow dance of celestial bodies that had been unfolding since the beginning of time. As she watched, Elena began to notice that the stars seemed to be reflected in the silver leaves of the olive trees, as if the trees were capturing starlight and holding it in their branches like thousands of tiny lanterns. This interplay between earth and sky, between the rooted stability of the trees and the infinite expanse of the cosmos, created a sense of connection that was both grounding and expansive, both deeply peaceful and mysteriously exhilarating. The night sounds of the grove were different from the day sounds, Elena realized. The busy chatter of daytime birds had given way to the softer, more mysterious calls of night creatures, the gentle hooting of an owl somewhere in the distance, the rustle of small animals moving through the undergrowth, the whisper of wind through the grass. These sounds did not disturb the peace of the grove, but rather deepened it, like the gentle bass notes in a symphony that provide depth and richness to the melody. Elena found herself breathing more slowly and deeply as she listened to these night sounds, her body naturally synchronizing with the rhythm of the grove around her. Each breath seemed to carry her deeper into a state of relaxation she had never experienced before. A letting go that was not about falling asleep, but about awakening to a deeper level of consciousness, a more profound way of being present in the world. The scent of the night air was changing too, becoming richer and more complex as the coolness drew out different fragrances from the plants around her. The olive trees themselves had a subtle scent, something clean and slightly resinous that seemed to clear her mind and deepen her breathing. Mixed with this were the stronger scents of the herbs growing wild among the trees, lavender and rosemary, sage and thyme, creating a natural aromatherapy treatment that worked directly on her nervous system, coaxing her body into ever deeper states of relaxation and peace. As Elena sat beneath the ancient olive tree, surrounded by the gentle sounds and scents of the Mediterranean night, she began to understand that she had stumbled upon something truly extraordinary. Not just a beautiful place, but a living system designed by nature itself to promote healing and restoration. The grove was like a giant organism whose every part worked together to create an environment of perfect peace, where the stressed and weary could come to remember what it felt like to be truly, deeply well. The realization filled her with a sense of wonder and gratitude that was almost overwhelming. How many people, she wondered, walked through their lives without ever discovering places like this, without ever experiencing the profound peace that came from being in perfect harmony with the natural world? How many never learned to listen to the ancient wisdom that whispered through silver leaves, never allowed themselves to be held and healed by the patient love of growing things? As the night deepened around her, Elena felt herself settling even more completely into the embrace of the ancient tree, her breathing slowing to match the deep, patient rhythm of the life force that pulsed through its massive trunk. The stars above grew brighter and more numerous, and the silver leaves continued their gentle dance in the evening breeze, carrying with them the whispered stories of all the souls who had found refuge in this sacred grove throughout the long centuries of its existence. Chapter 3: The Constellation of Memory. The deep blue of the Mediterranean night sky gradually revealed its hidden treasures as Elena's eyes adjusted to the darkness. What had seemed like a simple canopy of black velvet was actually alive with countless points of light, each star a distant sun with its own story to tell. The olive trees formed a natural frame around her view of the heavens, their ancient branches creating windows through which she could observe the slow, eternal dance of the cosmos. Elena had always been drawn to stars, but she had never experienced them quite like this. In the city, light pollution washed out all but the brightest celestial bodies, reducing the night sky to a pale shadow of its true glory. Here, in the protective embrace of the olive grove, far from the artificial lights of modern civilization, the stars revealed themselves in all their ancient splendor, their light pure and clear, and somehow deeply nourishing to her spirit. As she lay back against the broad trunk of the olive tree, Elena found herself remembering stories her grandmother had told her about the stars, not the scientific explanations she had learned in school, but the older stories, the myths and legends that had helped humans make sense of their place in the universe for thousands of years. Her grandmother had been a woman who understood the power of stories to heal and comfort, and she had shared these tales during long summer evenings when Elena was a child, sitting together on the porch swing while the night air carried the scent of jasmine and the sound of crickets singing their ancient songs. The constellation of Orion was visible through the olive branches, his bright belt of 3 stars unmistakable even to Elena's untrained eye. She remembered her grandmother's version of his story, not the Greek tale of the great hunter, but an older story, one that came from the land of her ancestors, where Orion was seen as a peaceful shepherd who watched over the flocks of stars that grazed across the night sky, keeping them safe from the darkness that lurked at the edges of the world. As Elena gazed up at the constellation, she began to feel a strange sensation, as if the boundary between herself and the star-filled sky was becoming more permeable, more fluid. The longer she looked, the more she felt herself expanding, her consciousness growing larger and more encompassing, until she was no longer just a woman sitting beneath a tree, but something far greater, a being who partook of both earth and sky, both the rootedness of the ancient olive tree and the infinite expansiveness of the cosmos. This was not a frightening experience, but deeply comforting, like being held in the arms of something so vast and loving that all her worries and fears seemed to dissolve into insignificance. She was part of this great web of being. She realized, connected to the tree behind her, and the stars above her, and the rich, dark earth below her in ways that were both mysterious and absolutely real. The separation she had always felt between herself and the natural world was revealed to be an illusion, a trick of modern living that had made her forget her true nature as a child of the earth and sky. The olive trees around her seemed to understand this truth instinctively. They had never forgotten their connection to the cosmos, Elena realized. Their roots reached deep into the earth, drawing sustenance from the same source that fed all living things, while their branches stretched upward toward the stars, participating in the great conversation between earth and sky that had been going on since the beginning of time. They were living bridges between the material and spiritual worlds, teaching by their very existence that these apparent opposites were actually parts of a greater whole. As this understanding deepened within her, Elena began to notice that her breathing had synchronized not just with the tree behind her, but with something even larger and more fundamental. She was breathing with the rhythm of the earth itself. She realized, with the slow, deep pulse of the planet as it turned through space, carrying its cargo of trees and stars, and sleeping souls toward some unimaginable destiny. The stars seemed to pulse in harmony with this same rhythm, their light growing brighter and dimmer in patterns that seemed both random and meaningful, like a vast cosmic heartbeat that connected all things in a web of light and love. Elena found herself remembering something her grandmother had told her about stars, that they were not just distant suns burning in the void, but the souls of all those who had ever lived, watching over the world with infinite compassion and wisdom. Whether this was literally true or simply a beautiful metaphor, Elena could not say. But as she lay beneath the olive tree gazing up at the star-filled sky, she felt the presence of something vast and benevolent, something that seemed to know her completely and love her unconditionally. It was as if all the ancestors of her spirit were gathered above her, their light forming a canopy of protection and blessing that made her feel safer and more loved than she had ever felt before. One star in particular seemed to call to her attention, not because it was brighter than the others, but because something about its light felt familiar, comforting, like the smile of an old friend. As Elena focused on this star, she found herself remembering her grandmother more vividly than she had in years. Not just the stories she had told, but the quality of presence she had brought to everything she did. The way she had moved through the world with such grace and certainty, as if she carried within herself some secret knowledge about how to live well. Her grandmother had been a woman who understood the healing power of simple things, the comfort of a warm cup of tea on a cold day, the peace that came from tending a garden, the deep satisfaction of creating something beautiful with her own hands. She had lived through difficult times, wars and depressions, the loss of loved ones, the countless small griefs that accumulate over the course of a long life. But she had somehow managed to maintain an unshakable faith in the basic goodness of existence. a belief that underneath all the surface troubles of the world, there was something eternal and unbreakable that could be trusted completely. Elena had always wondered where this faith came from, what secret her grandmother had discovered that allowed her to remain so peaceful and loving, even in the face of life's inevitable challenges. Now, lying beneath the ancient olive tree, with the stars spread out above her like a blanket of light, she began to understand. Her grandmother had found her way to places like this. Elena realized not necessarily olive groves under Mediterranean skies, but sanctuaries where the artificial divisions between self and world, between human and nature, between earth and heaven, revealed themselves to be the illusions they truly were. The understanding brought with it a wave of emotion so profound that Elena felt tears running down her cheeks, not tears of sadness, but tears of recognition, of coming home to something she had always known, but had forgotten how to access. This was what she had been searching for without even knowing it. This sense of connection to something larger than herself. This feeling of being held and loved by the very fabric of existence itself. As the tears dried on her cheeks, Elena became aware of a subtle change in the quality of the starlight above her. The stars seemed to be pulsing more strongly now, their light more intense and somehow more alive, as if her tears had opened some channel of communication between herself and the cosmos. She could feel their light entering her body through her eyes, traveling through her nervous system like liquid peace, carrying with it messages of comfort and healing that her mind could not translate into words, but her heart understood perfectly. The olive tree behind her seemed to respond to this influx of starlight, its trunk growing warmer against her back, its ancient presence becoming even more substantial and supportive. Elena had the sense that the tree was serving as a kind of cosmic antenna, drawing down the healing energy of the stars and channeling it into her body through the points where her spine touched its bark. This was not a fantasy, she realized, but a real exchange of energy, a natural process that had been available to humans for as long as there had been trees and stars, and people wise enough to seek the healing power of their combination. The constellation of Orion was directly overhead now, his bright stars forming a pattern that seemed to be inscribed on the inside of Elena's eyelids every time she blinked. But as she continued to gaze upward, she began to see that the individual constellations were part of an even larger pattern, a vast mandala of light that encompassed the entire visible sky. This was the constellation of memory, she realized, not the memory of events and experiences, but the deeper memory that connected all things, the cosmic recollection of the original unity from which everything had emerged, and to which everything would eventually return. As this great pattern revealed itself to her, Elena felt herself becoming part of it, her own small light joining the vast network of illumination that connected every star to every other star, every tree to every other tree, every soul to every other soul. She was no longer a separate being sitting beneath a tree, but a conscious point of light within an infinite web of consciousness, held in perfect safety by the love that was the very substance of existence itself. The night air grew cooler around her, but Elena felt no chill. She was warmed from within by the starlight that flowed through her veins, by the ancient wisdom that pulsed in the tree behind her, by the deep peace that came from knowing herself to be exactly where she belonged. The olive grove had become her temple, the star-filled sky her cathedral, and she was both worshiper and blessing, both seeker and sought, both question and answer in the great mystery of being alive in such a beautiful world. Chapter 4: The Keeper of Sacred Hours. In the deepest part of the night, when the stars had reached their highest point in the sky, and the olive grove had settled into its most profound state of peace, Elena became aware of a presence moving through the trees. It was not a disturbing presence, quite the opposite. There was something so naturally peaceful about this new awareness that it seemed to Elena like another layer of the grove's tranquility revealing itself, like a flower opening its deepest petals, only when the conditions were perfectly right. The presence announced itself first through the subtle sounds that accompany someone who moves through the world with complete harmony with their environment. There was the soft whisper of feet on the carpet of fallen olive leaves, the gentle brush of fabric against branches, the quiet rhythm of breathing that matched perfectly the breathing of the night itself. These were not the sounds of intrusion, but of belonging, as if whoever was approaching had been walking through this grove for so long that they had become part of its very essence. Elena found that she felt no alarm, no need to sit up or prepare for interaction. Instead, she remained perfectly still against the ancient tree, her eyes half closed, her breathing deep and regular, feeling as though she were witnessing something sacred that required nothing from her but simple presence and openness. The starlight above seemed to grow gentler, more golden, as if the cosmos itself were dimming its lights out of respect for whatever ceremony was about to unfold. The figure that emerged from between the olive trees was that of an elderly man whose very presence seemed to emanate peace. He moved with the careful grace of someone who had learned to treat every step as a form of prayer, every gesture as an offering to the sacred mystery of existence. His hair was silver white, catching the starlight like the leaves of the olive trees themselves, and his face bore the deep lines that come not from worry or hardship, but from years of smiling at the simple wonder of being alive in such a beautiful world. He wore simple clothes, a white linen shirt that seemed to glow softly in the darkness, loose pants that moved with him like water, and feet that were bare, as if he had long ago decided that shoes were an unnecessary barrier between himself and the earth he walked upon. In his hands, he carried a small oil lamp whose flame burned steady and bright despite the gentle breeze that moved through the grove. Its warm light creating a small circle of golden illumination that seemed to sanctify everything it touched. Elena watched as the man, for she somehow knew that he was not just any man, but the keeper of this sacred place, the guardian of its mysteries, and the tender of its ancient peace, moved slowly through the grove, stopping at each tree to place his free hand gently against its trunk. At each tree, he would pause for a long moment, his eyes closed, his lips moving in what might have been prayer or blessing, or simply the whispered sharing of gratitude between old friends. There was something so deeply moving about this ritual that Elena felt tears rising in her eyes once again. Here was someone who understood what she was only beginning to discover, that the olive trees were not simply plants, but living beings worthy of respect and love, ancient teachers who had much to offer anyone wise enough to approach them with an open heart. The keeper's nightly rounds were not just a duty, but a privilege, she realized. A sacred conversation between human consciousness and the patient wisdom of the natural world. As the keeper moved closer to the tree beneath which Elena rested, she found herself holding her breath, not from fear, but from a kind of reverent anticipation. She had the sense that she was about to witness something extraordinary, something that would help her understand the deeper mysteries of this place and perhaps of her own soul as well. The keeper's lamp cast dancing shadows on the ground, and Elena could see that the earth around each tree was carefully tended, free of weeds, but rich with the fallen leaves that the keeper had clearly chosen to leave as nature's own offering to the roots below. When the keeper reached Elena's tree, for she had already begun to think of it as hers, as if the ancient olive had claimed her as its own, he paused and looked directly at her, his eyes meeting hers across the small space that separated them. His gaze was neither surprised nor intrusive, but deeply kind, filled with the sort of understanding that comes from a lifetime of meeting souls who had found their way to this sacred grove in search of something they could not find anywhere else in the world. "You have come at the perfect time," he said, his voice so soft that it seemed to blend with the whisper of the olive leaves above them. "The trees have been waiting for you." His words carried the weight of truth, not as information, but as recognition, as if he were simply acknowledging something that had already been established long before Elena had ever set foot on the path that led to this place. Elena found that she was not surprised by his words, or by his presence, or by the way he seemed to know her without introduction. In the deep peace of the olive grove, surrounded by the ancient wisdom of the trees and the infinite blessing of the starlight, such miracles seemed not only possible, but perfectly natural. She nodded slowly, understanding that she had indeed arrived at exactly the moment when she was meant to be here, guided by forces far more wise and loving than her own conscious planning could ever have achieved. The keeper moved closer and settled himself on the ground near Elena, his movements slow and deliberate, like someone who had long ago learned that rushing was not only unnecessary, but actually counterproductive to the deeper purposes of life. He placed his lamp on the ground between them, its warm light creating a small sanctuary of illumination that somehow made the grove feel even more peaceful and protected than it had before. "I have been the keeper of this grove for 40 years, he said, his voice taking on the quality of someone beginning a story that had been told many times before, but never grew old in the telling. Before me, there was another keeper, and before him another, stretching back through the centuries like the rings of growth in these ancient trees. We are not the owners of this place, but its servants, the guardians of its peace and the witnesses to its healing power." As he spoke, Elena found herself settling even more deeply into the support of the tree behind her, her breathing slowing to match the rhythm of the keeper's words. There was something hypnotic about his voice, something that seemed to bypass her analytical mind and speak directly to the part of her that understood truth not through logic, but through direct experience, through the recognition of what felt deeply and unmistakably right. "Each person who finds their way here," the keeper continued, "comes in search of something different. Some seek healing from old wounds. Others rest from the weariness that comes from living too long in separation from their true nature. Some come seeking answers to questions they cannot even formulate, while others come simply because they feel called, drawn by something they cannot name but cannot resist. But regardless of what they think they are seeking, they all find the same thing in the end themselves, but themselves as they truly are, not as the world has taught them to believe they must be." Elena felt a deep resonance with these words, understanding that the keeper was describing not just the experience of others, but her own journey as well. She had come to the grove thinking she was simply seeking a moment of peace, a brief respite from the pressures and demands of her ordinary life. But she was beginning to understand that what she had actually found was far more profound, a doorway into a way of being that she had always known was possible, but had never quite been able to access in her daily life. The keeper lifted his lamp slightly, its light illuminating the bark of the ancient olive tree and revealing the intricate patterns carved there by time and weather, and the slow, patient work of growth. "This tree is particularly special," he said, his voice filled with the kind of reverence usually reserved for sacred objects. "It is the oldest in the grove, perhaps 800 years old, maybe more. It has stood here through wars and peace, through drought and abundance, through the coming and going of countless human lives. And in all that time, it has never stopped growing, never stopped reaching toward the light, never stopped offering its gifts to anyone who approaches with an open heart." Elena placed her hand against the tree's bark, feeling again the warm, steady pulse of life within the ancient wood. 800 years, she thought, trying to comprehend the vastness of time that this tree represented. When this olive had first sprouted from the earth, the world had been so different. No electric lights, no automobiles, no modern cities stretching across the landscape. Yet here it stood, unchanged in its essential nature, still offering the same gifts of peace and shelter that it had provided to countless generations of seekers. "The trees are the true teachers here," the keeper said, his words floating on the night air like a gentle blessing. "We humans are the students, always learning, always being reminded of what we have forgotten in our hurry to grow up and achieve and accomplish. The trees know secrets that we have lost, how to be still without being stagnant, how to grow without losing our roots, how to give without depleting ourselves, how to endure without becoming rigid or bitter." As if responding to his words, the olive tree's leaves rustled softly overhead, their silver surfaces catching the lamplight and transforming it into something that seemed almost magical. Elena felt as though the tree were acknowledging the keeper's words, agreeing with this assessment of its wisdom, offering itself once again as a teacher to anyone humble enough to learn. The keeper reached into a small pouch that hung from his belt and withdrew something that glittered in the lamplight. Elena saw that it was a small vial filled with what appeared to be olive oil, but oil of such purity and clarity that it seemed to glow with its own inner light. "This oil comes from the trees of this grove," he explained, holding the vial so that its contents caught and reflected the flame of his lamp. "It is pressed in the old way, with gratitude and reverence, and it carries within it not just the essence of the olives, but something of the peace of this place itself." He unstoppered the vial and allowed a few drops of the oil to fall onto his palm, where it seemed to shimmer with an almost otherworldly luminescence. The ancients knew that certain substances could carry spiritual qualities as well as physical ones, he said, his voice taking on the tone of someone sharing a sacred teaching. This oil has been blessed by time and moonlight, by the prayers of generations of keepers, by the deep peace of this grove. When applied with the proper intention, it can help to open channels of healing that we have forgotten how to access on our own. Elena watched in fascination as the keeper cupped his hands around the small pool of oil in his palm, breathing over it gently, his lips moving in what might have been prayer or blessing, or simply the whispered expression of gratitude. The oil seemed to respond to his attention, growing brighter and more luminous, as if his reverence were somehow awakening properties that lay dormant, until called forth by the proper combination of intention and love. "May I?" the keeper asked, gesturing toward Elena's forehead. There was nothing presumptuous in his request, only the gentle offer of someone who had spent decades learning how to serve the healing power of this sacred place. Elena nodded, understanding instinctively that this was part of why she had been drawn here, part of the ceremony that her soul had been seeking without her conscious mind even knowing it. The keeper dipped his finger in the luminous oil and touched it gently to Elena's forehead, right at the point between her eyebrows where ancient traditions located the seat of inner wisdom. The oil felt warm against her skin, warmer than the ambient temperature could account for. And as it touched her, Elena felt a subtle shift in her consciousness, as if some channel that had been closed for years was suddenly opening, allowing new currents of awareness to flow through her being. "This is the chrism of peace," the keeper said softly, his voice seeming to come from very far away, even though he sat just beside her. "It carries the blessing of all the souls who have found rest beneath these trees, the accumulated wisdom of all the keepers who have served this grove, the deep patience of the olive trees themselves. Let it remind you that you are never truly separate from the source of peace, that it lives within you always, waiting to be remembered and reclaimed." As the oil spread across her forehead, Elena felt wave after wave of relaxation moving through her body, starting from the point where the keeper had touched her and radiating outward like ripples spreading across the surface of a still pond. Her breathing deepened and slowed. Her heart rate settled into a rhythm that seemed to match the slow pulse of the ancient tree behind her. And her mind grew quieter and more still than it had been in years. The keeper settled back against his own tree, a smaller olive that grew just a few feet away. And Elena realized that this too was part of his nightly ritual. This time of sitting in silent communion with the grove and anyone who had found their way to its sanctuary. He did not feel the need to fill the silence with conversation or explanation, but simply offered his presence as another gift, another source of peace for anyone who needed it. As the minutes passed, or perhaps hours, for time seemed to move differently here, flowing like honey rather than rushing like water. Elena found herself entering states of consciousness that she had never experienced before. The boundaries between herself and the tree seemed to dissolve, and she felt her awareness expanding to include not just her own small circle of sensation, but the entire grove, the whole network of ancient trees that stood in silent fellowship under the star-filled sky. She could feel the slow circulation of sap through the tree behind her, the patient work of roots extending deep into the earth, the gentle conversation that the trees seemed to be having with each other through underground networks that science was only beginning to understand. She was part of this conversation now. She realized, not as an intruder, but as a welcome participant, a consciousness that had been invited to join the eternal dialogue between earth and sky, between growth and rest, between the individual soul and the greater mystery of which it was always a part. The keeper's presence beside her felt like an anchor, holding space for her journey while ensuring that she remained safely connected to ordinary reality, even as she explored these extraordinary states of awareness. His breathing provided a steady rhythm that kept her grounded. His lamp offered a constant point of gentle light that reminded her that she was held and protected, even in the vastness of her expanding consciousness. The grove remembers everyone who has ever found peace here, the keeper said eventually, his voice blending so naturally with the night sounds that Elena almost thought the trees themselves were speaking. Their gratitude becomes part of the soil. Their healing becomes part of the air. Their peace becomes part of the starlight that blesses this place. You are adding your own gift to this collection now, your own thread to the tapestry of healing that has been woven here over countless years. Elena understood that this was true, that her presence here was not just about receiving, but also about giving, not just about being healed, but about contributing to the healing power of the place itself. Every person who found genuine peace beneath these trees, she realized, left something of that peace behind as a gift for future seekers, creating a positive feedback loop that made the grove more powerful and more healing with each passing year. The oil on her forehead continued to work its gentle magic, opening channels of perception that allowed her to sense the deep interconnectedness of all things. She could feel the love that the keeper brought to his work, the gratitude of countless visitors who had found what they needed here, the patient blessing of the olive trees as they shared their ancient wisdom with yet another seeking soul. All of these presences blended together into a symphony of peace that seemed to lift her beyond the boundaries of her ordinary self and into something far larger and more encompassing. As the night deepened around them, Elena felt herself being drawn into the deepest rest she had ever known, a state that was not quite sleep, but something far more profound, a conscious relaxation that allowed her to remain aware while letting go completely, to be fully present while releasing all effort, to rest in the perfect safety of knowing herself, to be held by forces far greater and more loving than she had ever imagined possible. Chapter 5: The Language of Root and Branch. In the deep sanctuary of the night, as Elena rested in the profound peace that the Keeper's blessing had opened within her, she became aware of a new form of communication beginning to unfold around her. It was not language as she had always understood it, not words or concepts that moved from mind to mind, but something far more ancient and direct, a form of knowing that flowed through the network of roots and branches that connected every living thing in the grove. The sensation began as a gentle tingling in the places where her body touched the earth, as if the ground beneath her was alive with subtle electrical currents that carried information rather than mere energy. Through her palms, pressed flat against the soft carpet of decomposed olive leaves, through her spine where it rested against the ancient tree, through the soles of her feet where they had unconsciously come to rest on the exposed roots that emerged from the earth like the fingers of some great underground hand. Elena felt herself being drawn into a conversation that had been going on for centuries. This was the mycorrhizal network that connected all the trees in the grove. She realized with a flash of understanding that came not from her rational mind, but from some deeper place of knowing. Scientists called it the Wood Wide Web, the underground internet of fungi that allowed trees to share nutrients, water, and even information across vast distances. But what Elena was experiencing was far more profound than any scientific description could capture. This was the nervous system of the Earth itself, the way the planet maintained its own consciousness and shared its wisdom with any being capable of listening with their whole self rather than just their thinking mind. Through this network, Elena began to sense the individual personalities of the trees around her. Each olive tree, she realized, was not just a generic member of its species, but a unique being with its own character, its own way of experiencing the world, its own gifts to offer to the greater community of the grove. The tree behind her, the ancient one that the keeper had said was 800 years old, felt like a wise grandmother, patient and nurturing, with roots that went so deep they seemed to touch the very heart of the earth. Its presence was one of absolute stability, of having seen so much and endured so much that nothing could shake its fundamental equanimity. To her left, Elena sensed a younger tree, perhaps only 200 or 300 years old, whose energy felt more dynamic and playful, like a teenager who was still figuring out its place in the world, but was eager to contribute whatever it could to the community. This tree's roots were still spreading, still exploring, still learning how to best anchor itself in the world. And Elena could feel its excitement at being part of something so much larger and more enduring than its individual existence. To her right stood another ancient one, this one with a quality that felt more like a grandfather, stern but loving, protective of the entire grove, with branches that had learned to shelter smaller trees and provide windbreaks during the violent storms that occasionally swept across the Mediterranean landscape. This tree carried within its rings the memory of wars and droughts, of human joys and sorrows played out beneath its branches. And it offered the deep comfort that comes from having witnessed the full spectrum of experience and found reason for hope even in the darkest times. As Elena's awareness expanded through the root network, she began to sense trees that were further away, trees at the edges of the grove and beyond, each one adding its own voice to the chorus of wisdom that flowed through the underground web of connection. Some were ancient olives like the ones immediately around her, but others were different species, oak trees with their own deep wisdom, pine trees with their upward-reaching energy, fig trees heavy with the sweetness of abundance. All were connected. All were part of the same vast conversation about how to live well on this earth, how to give and receive in perfect balance, how to grow toward the light while remaining firmly rooted in the darkness of the soil. The keeper, Elena realized, was also part of this network, his decades of faithful service having opened channels of communication between his human consciousness and the deeper awareness of the trees. She could sense his presence not just as a physical body sitting nearby, but as a node in the web of connection, a translator who helped bridge the gap between human understanding and plant wisdom. His breathing had synchronized perfectly with the slow pulse of sap through the olive trees. His heartbeat had learned to match the rhythm of growth and rest that governed all life in the grove. Through him, Elena began to understand that what she was experiencing was not unique or supernatural, but simply the natural state of consciousness that became available when humans remembered how to live in proper relationship with the natural world. Every indigenous culture had known about this network, she realized. This web of communication that connected all living things. It was only modern civilization, with its emphasis on separation and control, that had forgotten how to listen to the earth's own wisdom. As this understanding deepened, Elena felt her own consciousness becoming more firmly integrated into the network. She was no longer just an observer, but a participant, adding her own unique frequency to the symphony of awareness that flowed through the grove. Her human perspective, with its capacity for language and abstract thought, was welcome here, she realized, but only as one voice among many, not as the dominant or most important voice, but simply as another way of experiencing and expressing the great mystery of existence. Through the network, Elena began to receive what could only be called teachings, though they came not as concepts or instructions, but as direct transmissions of understanding that bypassed her analytical mind entirely. She learned that the olive tree's secret to longevity lay not in avoiding stress or difficulty, but in developing the capacity to bend without breaking, to endure without becoming rigid, to maintain their essential nature while adapting to whatever conditions life presented. The trees that had survived for centuries had learned to flow like water around obstacles, to find nourishment even in poor soil, to reach toward light even when surrounded by darkness. She learned that the tree's approach to time was fundamentally different from human experience, that they thought not in terms of minutes or hours or even years, but in terms of seasons and decades and centuries, always taking the long view, always working toward goals that might not be achieved for generations. This perspective brought with it a deep patience and a profound trust in the ultimate goodness of existence, a faith that whatever was needed would eventually be provided. That life always found a way to continue and flourish, even under the most challenging circumstances. Most profoundly, Elena learned that the trees experienced no separation between individual and community, between self and environment, between their own well-being and the well-being of the whole. Each tree understood itself to be both a unique individual and an integral part of the larger organism of the forest, contributing its own gifts while receiving support from all the others. Competition existed, but only within a larger framework of cooperation, and even competitive behaviors ultimately served the health and diversity of the whole system. As these teachings flowed through her, Elena felt old patterns of thinking and feeling beginning to dissolve and transform. The anxiety and urgency that had driven so much of her life revealed themselves to be based on illusions, the illusion of separation, the illusion of scarcity, the illusion that she had to struggle alone against a hostile world. The tree's way of being offered an alternative, the possibility of living in trust rather than fear, in cooperation rather than competition, in patience rather than urgency. The keeper's lamp flickered slightly in the night breeze, its warm light creating dancing shadows on the trunks of the surrounding trees. Elena realized that she could see these shadows not just as patterns of light and dark, but as another form of the communication that flowed through the grove. The trees were using the movement of their branches to send messages to each other. She understood subtle signals about wind direction and moisture levels, and the presence of visitors like herself, who had come seeking the peace that only ancient places could provide. As the night progressed, Elena found herself sinking deeper and deeper into this language of root and branch. This conversation that required no words, but communicated everything that truly mattered. Her breathing slowed to match the slow circulation of nutrients through the tree's vascular systems. Her heartbeat synchronized with the patient pulse of growth that governed all life in the grove. And her consciousness expanded to include not just her own small circle of awareness, but the entire web of connection that linked every living thing in this sacred place. The stars above seemed to pulse in harmony with this underground network. Elena realized, as if the same force that connected tree to tree through their roots also connected earth to sky through the mysterious channels of gravity and light and love that bound the cosmos together. She was part of this vast web now, no longer a separate being observing from the outside, but a conscious cell in the body of existence itself, sharing in the great work of growth and healing and transformation that was always going on, always available to anyone who knew how to listen with their whole being rather than just their thinking mind. In this state of expanded awareness, Elena began to understand that her journey to the olive grove had not been a chance occurrence, but part of a larger pattern, a calling that had been issued not by any human agency, but by the earth itself, by the trees that sensed her need for healing and had somehow drawn her to this place where such healing was possible. She was not the first to receive such a calling, she realized, and she would not be the last. The grove was always sending out its gentle invitation to any soul that was ready to remember its true nature as part of the great web of life. As this understanding settled into her bones, Elena felt a profound sense of gratitude rising within her. Not just gratitude for the peace and healing she was receiving, but gratitude for being allowed to participate in something so ancient and beautiful and wise. She was being given a great gift, she realized. The gift of remembering who she truly was beneath all the roles and identities that life had layered upon her. She was a child of the earth and sky, a conscious expression of the same force that grew the olive trees and lit the stars and wove the great web of connection that bound all things together in love. Chapter 6: The Healing Circle of Seasons. As the night deepened and Elena's consciousness became ever more integrated with the ancient rhythms of the olive grove, she began to experience something that seemed to exist outside of ordinary time altogether. It was as if the trees were sharing with her their accumulated memories of seasons, not just the changing of weather patterns, but the deeper cycles of growth and rest, abundance and scarcity, expansion and contraction that governed all life on Earth through the network of roots and consciousness that now connected her to every tree in the grove. Elena felt herself being drawn into a vision that was both memory and prophecy, both historical record and eternal present. She was experiencing the grove as it existed in all seasons simultaneously, seeing it not as a frozen moment in time, but as a living mandala of continuous transformation, always changing, yet always essentially the same. Spring came first in her awareness, arriving not as a memory, but as a living presence that filled the grove with an almost palpable sense of renewal and possibility. Elena could feel the excitement of the trees as their sap began to flow more freely, carrying nutrients up from the deep roots toward the reaching branches, where new leaves would soon unfurl like tiny green flags of victory. The olive tree's response to spring was different from the dramatic displays of other species. No showy blossoms or sudden burst of colorful foliage, but their joy was no less real for being subtle. She could sense the trees' deep satisfaction as their ancient root systems awakened from winter's rest, drawing moisture and minerals from the earth with renewed vigor. The mycorrhizal network that connected all the trees pulsed with increased activity as nutrients and information flowed more freely through the underground web of connection. Young shoots pushed up from the base of old trunks, testament to the tree's eternal capacity for renewal even in their great age. The springtime grove was filled with the sounds of new life, the return of migratory birds who nested in the olive branches, the busy hum of bees visiting the small, creamy flowers that appeared on the trees in late spring, the gentle rustle of new leaves unfurling to catch the strengthening sun. Elena felt herself sharing in the trees' sense of anticipation, their patient excitement as they prepared for another season of growth and giving. But spring in the grove was not just about individual trees preparing for their own growth. Elena realized it was about the entire ecosystem awakening as one organism, each part supporting and being supported by all the others. The wildflowers that bloomed between the trees provided nectar for the bees that would pollinate the olive blossoms. The birds that nested in the branches helped control insect populations, while their droppings fertilized the soil. Even the decomposing leaves from previous years contributed to the rich humus that would nourish new growth. As the vision of spring reached its peak and began to transform into summer, Elena felt the quality of the grove's energy shift once again. Summer brought a sense of abundance and fullness, of work well done and gifts freely given. The olive trees stood in their full glory now, their silver-green canopies providing blessed shade from the intense Mediterranean sun, their branches heavy with the developing fruit that would eventually become the grove's most precious offering. The summer grove hummed with life and activity, but it was activity balanced by deep rest, work balanced by perfect relaxation. The trees had learned the secret of productive ease. Elena realized how to fulfill their purpose completely while never struggling, never straining, never pushing beyond their natural capacity. They simply did what they were designed to do, trusting that their patient, steady efforts would be rewarded in due time. During the heat of summer days, the grove became a sanctuary of coolness and peace, its trees providing shelter not just for humans, but for countless other creatures who sought refuge from the blazing sun. Lizards basked on sun-warmed stones in the morning and retreated to shady crevices during the heat of midday. Birds rested quietly in the branches during the hottest hours, conserving their energy for the cooler times of dawn and dusk when they could resume their active lives. Elena felt herself learning from the trees' approach to the intensity of summer, how to remain centered and peaceful even when external conditions were challenging, how to provide shelter and comfort for others even while caring for her own needs, how to trust in the natural rhythms of activity and rest that governed all healthy life. The trees taught by example that there was no need to resist difficult conditions, only to adapt to them with grace and patience, knowing that all seasons pass in their proper time. As summer gradually gave way to autumn in her vision, Elena experienced yet another transformation in the grove's energy. Autumn brought a sense of harvest and gratitude, of work completed and gifts shared with the world. The olive trees now offered their greatest treasure, the fruit that had been slowly developing through the long summer months, turning from green to deep purple-black, swelling with the oil that had made these trees precious to human civilization for thousands of years. But autumn in the grove was about more than just the olive harvest, Elena realized. It was about the wisdom that comes from completion, from having grown and given and learned throughout the full cycle of the seasons. The tree's energy in autumn felt deeply satisfied, filled with the quiet joy that comes from having fulfilled one's purpose completely and well. Their leaves began to take on golden tones, and some of the older leaves released their hold on the branches, spiraling gently down to join the rich carpet that nourished the roots below. There was something profoundly moving about the tree's approach to letting go, Elena felt. They released their leaves not with sadness or regret, but with the same generosity with which they had produced them, understanding that what fell to the earth would become nourishment for future growth. This was the trees teaching about death and renewal, that nothing was ever truly lost, only transformed, only returned to the great web of life to be woven into new patterns of existence. The autumn grove was filled with the sounds of harvest, the gentle thump of olives falling to nets spread beneath the trees, the voices of families working together to gather the precious fruit, the old songs that had been sung during harvest time for countless generations. Elena could feel the trees' pleasure in this partnership with humans, their satisfaction in providing sustenance that would nourish bodies and souls throughout the coming winter. As autumn deepened toward winter, the grove's energy shifted once more, moving into the deepest and perhaps most profound of all the seasonal phases. Winter was the time of rest and reflection, of going inward, of allowing the wisdom accumulated through the year's experiences to settle into the very cells of the tree's being. The olive trees were particularly well suited to this contemplative season, their evergreen nature allowing them to remain conscious and present, even as they entered their period of deepest rest. Winter in the grove was not the dead season that many people imagined, Elena realized, but perhaps the most spiritually rich time of all. Stripped of the busyness of growth and production, the trees could focus entirely on simply being, on maintaining their connection to the deep sources of life that flowed up through their roots from the heart of the earth. Their bare branches reached toward the sky like arms raised in prayer, and their silver leaves, though fewer now, seemed to shine with even greater intensity in the clear winter light. The winter grove was a place of profound silence, but it was not empty silence. It was the silence of deep meditation, of consciousness turned inward to commune with the essential mystery of existence. Elena felt herself drawn into this meditative quality, her own awareness settling into the tree's state of peaceful contemplation, her breathing becoming so slow and deep that it seemed to match the rhythm of the Earth's own rotation through space. In winter, the grove revealed its true nature as a temple. Elena understood. Without the distractions of flowers and fruit and busy insect life, the essential architecture of the sacred space became visible. The trees stood like pillars in a vast cathedral, their trunks dark and strong against the pale winter sky, their arrangement creating natural pathways and chapels where contemplation came as naturally as breathing. As the vision of the 4 seasons completed its cycle and began again, Elena realized that she had been given a profound gift, the tree's own understanding of time, not as a linear progression, but as a spiral, each cycle returning to familiar themes, but at a deeper level, each season building upon the wisdom gained in previous cycles. The grove existed in eternal time. She understood, always moving through the seasons, but never getting older in any fundamental way. Always changing, but never losing its essential nature. This was the healing that the grove offered. She realized not just rest from the immediate stresses of daily life, but a remembering of how to live in harmony with the great cycles that governed all existence. The trees taught that there was a time for growth and a time for rest, a time for giving and a time for receiving, a time for action and a time for contemplation. By aligning herself with these natural rhythms rather than fighting against them, she could find the peace and balance that had been missing from her life. As the keeper's lamp continued to burn steadily beside her, Elena felt herself integrating the wisdom of the seasons into her very bones. She understood now that her own life could follow these same patterns, periods of rapid growth, balanced by times of consolidation, seasons of outward activity, balanced by seasons of inward reflection, times of abundance, balanced by times of simplicity. The grove had shown her a way of living that was both more natural and more sustainable than the relentless pace that modern life seemed to demand. The stars wheeled slowly overhead, marking the passage of hours that felt more like minutes in the timeless space of the grove. Elena realized that she was experiencing time the way the trees experienced it, not as a series of discrete moments rushing by, but as one continuous flow of eternal present, each moment perfect and complete in itself, yet connected to all the moments that had come before and all that would come after. Chapter 7: The Underground Cathedral. As the night progressed and Elena's consciousness continued to expand through her connection with the ancient olive trees, she became aware of an extraordinary phenomenon occurring beneath the surface of the grove. What had begun as a simple sensing of the mycorrhizal network connecting the trees had evolved into something far more profound, a direct experience of what could only be called an underground cathedral, a vast sacred space that existed in the hidden realm below the Earth's surface. Through her deepened connection with the root systems of the olive trees, Elena felt her awareness being drawn downward, deeper than she had ever imagined possible, into a world of such beauty and complexity that it took her breath away. This was not the dark, dead space that she had always imagined when she thought of underground realms, but a living galaxy of connection and communication, a universe of light and movement and conscious purpose that rivaled anything that existed above ground. The roots of the ancient olive trees descended far deeper than Elena had ever supposed, creating a mirror image of the grove above ground. but even more intricate and interconnected. The main taproot of the 800-year-old tree, beside which she rested, plunged straight down like a massive pillar, its surface glowing with a soft, phosphorescent light that seemed to emanate from within the living wood itself. From this central column, smaller roots branched out in all directions, creating an architectural structure that was both organic and utterly purposeful. But it was not just the olive roots that created this underground cathedral. Elena realized the entire ecosystem participated in its construction. The roots of other trees, oaks and pines, and wild figs, interwove with those of the olives, creating flying buttresses and supporting arches that gave the underground space both stability and breathtaking beauty. Smaller plants contributed their own delicate root systems, adding fine tracery and decorative elements that reminded Elena of the stone lacework in the great cathedrals of Europe. The mycorrhizal fungi that connected all these root systems formed what could only be called the stained glass windows of this underground cathedral. These were not the familiar mushrooms that appeared above ground, but vast networks of hair-thin filaments that glowed with their own inner light, creating patterns of indescribable beauty as they carried nutrients and information between the trees. Some of these fungal networks pulsed with slow rhythms like heartbeats. Others shimmered with rapid flickers like neural activity. And still others glowed with steady, constant light like eternal flames. As Elena's consciousness moved through this underground realm, she began to understand that she was experiencing something that few human beings had ever perceived directly: the true nervous system of the earth itself, the physical infrastructure through which the planet maintained its own form of consciousness and intelligence. Every tree, every plant, every patch of soil was connected to this vast network, sharing information about weather patterns, nutrient availability, threats, and opportunities, in a communication system that was far more sophisticated than anything humans had yet invented. But this underground cathedral was not just a communication network, Elena realized. It was also a storage system, a vast library where the accumulated wisdom of the forest was preserved and maintained. In the thickness of ancient roots, in the density of fungal networks, in the very chemistry of the soil itself, the grove maintained records of everything that had ever happened here. Every drought and flood, every season of abundance and scarcity, every generation of trees and plants and animals that had called this place home. Elena found herself able to access this library directly, to read the chemical signatures that told the story of the grove's long history. She could sense the footsteps of ancient peoples who had gathered olives here thousands of years ago. their presence recorded in the mineral composition of the soil. She could feel the joy of good harvest years stored in the cellular memory of the trees, and the patient endurance of difficult times preserved in the deeper layers of root and fungus. Most remarkably, she could sense the presence of all the human souls who had ever found peace in this grove. Their gratitude and healing, somehow absorbed into the very substance of the underground cathedral. Each person who had experienced transformation here had left something of themselves behind, not as ghosts or hauntings, but as blessings, as gifts that continued to radiate healing energy for future visitors. Elena understood that she was now part of this collection, that her own experience of peace and healing was being woven into the fabric of the place itself, becoming a gift for all who would come after her. The keeper, she realized, was particularly present in this underground realm. His 40 years of faithful service had created deep channels of connection between his human consciousness and the intelligence of the grove. Elena could sense his presence throughout the root networks, his daily meditations and prayers absorbed into the mycelial web, his love and dedication infusing the very soil with healing properties. He was as much a part of the grove now as any of the trees. His consciousness integrated into the larger awareness that governed this sacred space. As Elena explored deeper into the underground cathedral, she discovered chambers and chapels that seemed designed for specific kinds of healing and transformation. In one area, where the roots of several ancient olives converged around a deep spring, she found what could only be called a baptismal font, a sacred space where souls could be cleansed of old wounds and limiting beliefs. The water that flowed through this space carried such a high concentration of healing minerals and beneficial microorganisms that simply being near it induced profound states of cellular regeneration and spiritual renewal. In another area, where the largest and oldest roots formed a natural amphitheater, Elena discovered a space that felt like a council chamber, where the deep wisdom of the trees could be accessed directly by anyone who knew how to listen. Here, the mycorrhizal networks formed patterns of extraordinary complexity, creating what appeared to be a living mandala that pulsed with the accumulated knowledge of centuries. Elena understood that this was where the important decisions affecting the grove were made, where the trees consulted with each other about everything from weather patterns to the needs of visiting souls. Perhaps most moving of all, Elena found a space that could only be called the heart chamber of the underground cathedral, a circular room formed by the convergence of the deepest roots, where the very essence of the grove's consciousness seemed to reside. This space glowed with a warm, golden light that reminded Elena of the keeper's lamp, but infinitely more intense and all-encompassing. Here, she felt the presence of something so vast and loving that she could barely comprehend it, the soul of the grove itself, the collective consciousness that had been growing and deepening for hundreds of years. In this heart chamber, Elena experienced the most profound healing of her entire journey. Without any effort on her part, old patterns of fear and separation simply dissolved, replaced by a deep knowing of her own essential wholeness and connection to all life. She felt herself being rewoven at the cellular level, not just healed, but actually transformed into a more integrated and conscious version of herself. The grove's consciousness seemed to be updating her operating system, installing new programs for peace and joy and trust that would remain with her long after she left this sacred place. As she rested in this heart chamber, Elena became aware that she was not alone. The presence of other souls filled the space, not physical beings, but the essential spirits of all those who had ever found profound healing in the grove. They welcomed her into their company, not with words, but with a quality of love so pure and unconditional that it brought tears of gratitude to her eyes. She understood that she was now part of this eternal fellowship, this communion of souls who had discovered their true nature through their connection with the ancient wisdom of the trees. The keeper's voice seemed to reach her from very far away, though she knew he was sitting just beside her physical body on the surface above. "The trees are showing you their deepest secret," he said, his words filtering down through layers of root and soil to reach her in the heart chamber. "They want you to understand that what you're experiencing is always available, that this connection is your birthright as a child of the earth. The underground cathedral exists wherever trees grow, wherever soil lives, wherever the ancient networks of connection remain intact." Elena understood the profound truth of his words. The grove was not unique in possessing this underground realm. It was simply a place where the veil between worlds was particularly thin, where the sacred architecture of the Earth's consciousness was particularly accessible to human awareness. Similar cathedrals existed beneath every forest, every garden, every place where the natural world was allowed to express its true nature without interference. As her exploration of the underground cathedral reached its culmination, Elena felt herself being gently drawn back toward the surface, back toward her physical body, resting against the ancient olive tree. But she carried with her now the knowledge of what lay beneath, the understanding that she was always connected to this vast network of consciousness, always supported by the deep intelligence of the earth itself, always held in the loving embrace of the underground cathedral. That as her exploration of the underground cathedral reached its culmination, Elena felt herself being gently drawn back toward the surface, back toward her physical body, resting against the ancient olive tree. But she carried with her now the knowledge of what lay beneath, the understanding that she was always connected to this vast network of consciousness, always supported by the deep intelligence of the earth itself, always held in the loving embrace of the underground cathedral that existed wherever life flourished in its natural state. As her awareness gradually returned to the surface world, Elena felt fundamentally changed by her journey into the hidden realm below. The simple act of breathing now felt like a conscious participation in the great exchange between the underground and above-ground worlds. Each inhalation drawing up the wisdom of the roots, each exhalation offering her gratitude back to the living soil. She was no longer simply a person sitting beneath a tree, but a conscious bridge between the earth and sky, a living prayer that connected the depths and the heights in eternal communion. The keeper seemed to sense her return, and when she opened her eyes, she found him watching her with a gentle smile that spoke of deep understanding. "You have been far below," he said, not as a question, but as a recognition of something he had witnessed many times before. The trees rarely share their deepest secrets with casual visitors. You must have come here with a heart truly open to receive their gifts. Elena nodded, still feeling the lingering glow of the underground cathedral in her consciousness, still sensing the vast network of connection that pulsed beneath the surface of the grove. "I had no idea," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "I never imagined that such a world existed right beneath our feet, that the trees were connected in such profound ways, that the earth itself was so alive, so conscious, so full of love." The keeper's smile deepened, and he reached for his lamp, lifting it slightly so that its warm light illuminated both their faces in the darkness. "This is the great forgetting of our modern age," he said, his voice carrying the weight of ancient sadness, but also infinite compassion. "We have forgotten that we live not on the earth, but within it, not separate from nature, but as expressions of it. The underground cathedral you experienced is always there, always available, always offering its healing to anyone who remembers how to receive it." As he spoke, Elena felt the truth of his words settling into her bones, becoming part of her foundational understanding of reality. She could never again think of the natural world as merely a collection of separate objects. Never again see trees as just sources of lumber or shade. Never again walk upon the earth without knowing that she moved through a living temple whose every particle was infused with consciousness and purpose. "Will I be able to access this connection when I leave the grove?" she asked, a note of concern creeping into her voice. The thought of returning to the ordinary world, with its concrete and steel and endless distractions suddenly seemed overwhelming. How could she maintain this profound sense of connection in environments that seemed designed to make people forget their true nature? The keeper leaned forward slightly, his eyes twinkling with a light that reminded Elena of the stars above. "The connection you have made tonight is permanent," he assured her. "Once you have experienced the underground cathedral, once you have felt your roots touch the mycorrhizal networks, once you have been welcomed into the Earth's consciousness, that awareness becomes part of who you are. You will carry the grove with you wherever you go. And you will find that every tree, every plant, every patch of living soil will welcome you as family." His words brought a wave of relief so profound that Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks once again. But these were tears of joy, of gratitude, of the deep peace that comes from knowing that one has found something that can never be lost. The underground cathedral was not a place she had visited, but a part of herself she had reclaimed. Not an external experience, but an internal awakening that would color every moment of her remaining life. "There is one more gift the grove wishes to offer you," the keeper said, reaching again into the pouch at his belt. This time he withdrew not oil, but what appeared to be a small seed, perfectly round and smooth, that seemed to glow with its own inner light. "This is from the heart of the ancient tree that has sheltered you tonight," he explained, holding the seed so that it caught the lamplight. "It carries within it not just the genetic potential for a new tree, but the memory of all the peace and healing that has flowed through this grove for centuries." Elena looked at the seed with wonder, understanding instinctively that this was no ordinary gift, but something sacred, something that carried within its small form the essence of everything she had experienced in the grove. "What am I meant to do with it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Plant it wherever you feel called to create sanctuary," the keeper replied, pressing the warm seed into her palm. "It will grow wherever there is love and intention, wherever someone needs the kind of healing that only trees can provide. As it grows, it will carry the grove's blessing to its new home, creating another node in the great network of connection that links all sacred places on Earth." Elena closed her fingers around the seed, feeling its warmth spread through her palm and up her arm like a benediction. She understood that she was being entrusted with something precious beyond measure, that she was being asked to become a servant of the same forces that had created and maintained the olive grove for centuries. The thought filled her not with burden, but with the deepest sense of purpose she had ever experienced. "You are no longer just a visitor to sacred places," the keeper said, his voice taking on the quality of formal blessing. "You are now a keeper yourself, a guardian of the ancient wisdom, a bridge between the world that has forgotten and the world that remembers. Wherever you plant that seed, wherever you share what you have learned here, you will be extending the grove's healing influence into new territory. As the keeper spoke these words, Elena felt a fundamental shift in her identity, as if some dormant part of herself was awakening to its true purpose. She had come to the grove seeking rest and peace, but she was leaving with something far more valuable: a calling, a mission, a way of serving the healing of the world that felt as natural and essential as breathing. The night air around them seemed to shimmer with blessing as Elena carefully tucked the sacred seed into the pocket closest to her heart. She could feel its presence there like a warm coal, radiating not heat but peace, not energy but deep, abiding comfort. This seed would be her constant companion, she realized, a reminder of the underground cathedral and the vast network of love that connected all living things. Rest now, the keeper said gently, settling back against his own tree. Let the grove's final gift to you be the deepest sleep you have ever known, a sleep that will integrate all you have received and prepare you for the work that lies ahead. Dream the dreams of trees and wake tomorrow as someone new. Elena leaned back against the ancient olive tree, feeling its bark against her spine like the warm embrace of an old friend. The sacred seed pulsed gently against her heart. The keeper's lamp cast its protective circle of light around them, and the stars above wheeled in their eternal patterns of blessing and guidance. As her eyes grew heavy and her breathing deepened, Elena felt herself surrendering to the grove's final gift, a sleep so profound and restorative that it would complete her transformation and prepare her to carry the grove's healing into the world. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was the silver leaves of the olive trees catching the starlight, their gentle dance creating patterns of light and shadow that seemed to spell out messages of love and encouragement. The last thing she heard was the whisper of the night breeze through the branches, carrying the soft voices of the trees as they sang her to sleep with lullabies that had been 10,000 years in the making. Chapter 8: The Dance of Silver Dreams. In the depths of her sleep beneath the ancient olive tree, Elena entered a realm of dreams unlike any she had ever experienced. These were not the chaotic, symbolic dreams of ordinary slumber, but something far more coherent and purposeful. Visions that seemed to come directly from the consciousness of the grove itself. Gifts of understanding wrapped in the silver language of sleeping trees. She found herself floating above the olive grove. But it was the grove as it existed in dream time, where the boundaries between past and present, between physical and spiritual, between individual and universal consciousness had dissolved entirely. The trees below her glowed with an inner light that revealed their true nature as beings of pure love and wisdom. Their silver leaves now actually silver, shimmering with a metallic radiance that transformed the entire landscape into something that belonged more to heaven than to earth. In this dream grove, Elena could see the connections between all things made visible as streams of living light. The mycorrhizal networks that she had experienced in the underground cathedral now appeared as rivers of luminescence flowing between the trees, carrying not just nutrients and information, but actual thoughts and emotions, prayers and blessings. The accumulated love of all the souls who had ever found peace in this sacred place. As she watched, mesmerized by the beauty of this revealed truth, Elena became aware that she was not alone in the dream space. Other figures moved through the grove below her. Some she recognized as visitors like herself, souls who had come seeking healing and had found far more than they had ever hoped for. But others were different, beings of such radiance and grace that she understood them to be the guardians of the grove, the spiritual presences that had been called into existence by centuries of human devotion and gratitude. Among these luminous beings, Elena recognized the figure of Sophia, the ancient healer whose story the trees had whispered to her earlier in the night. But here in the dream realm, Sophia was not just a memory or a story, but a living presence, as real and immediate as the keeper who still sat beside Elena's sleeping form in the physical world. Sophia approached with a smile that seemed to illuminate the entire grove, her eyes bright with the wisdom that comes from having devoted one's entire life to the service of healing and love. "Welcome, sister," Sophia said, her voice carrying the music of wind through olive leaves. "You have traveled far to reach this place, though the journey was not measured in miles, but in openings of the heart, in willingness to receive what the world has always been trying to give you." Her words came not as sounds, but as direct transmissions of meaning that bypassed Elena's ears entirely and spoke directly to her soul. Elena felt herself drawn into Sophia's luminous presence, and as she did, she began to understand that the ancient healer was not just an individual from the past, but an archetypal figure, a representation of all those throughout history who had learned to serve as bridges between the human and natural worlds. In Sophia, Elena saw her own potential future self, someone who had learned to live in constant communion with the deeper intelligence of life, someone who had become a conduit for the healing forces that flowed through all of creation. "You have been chosen," Sophia continued, gesturing toward the seed that even in the dream Elena could feel pulsing against her heart. "Not by human authorities or institutions, but by the earth itself, by the trees that know when a soul is ready to serve the great work of healing and transformation. The seed you carry is more than just the potential for a new tree. It is a living symbol of your commitment to the path of the keeper, the way of those who tend the sacred spaces where heaven and earth meet. As Sophia spoke, the dream grove around them began to change and expand, revealing that it was connected to a vast network of other sacred groves, other temples in nature, where the same work of healing and awakening was taking place. Elena could see olive groves in distant lands, ancient oak forests in northern climates, redwood cathedrals on far coastlines, all connected by streams of light and consciousness, all serving as nodes in a global network of sanctuaries where souls could come to remember their true nature. This is the work you are called to join, Sophia explained, her gesture encompassing the entire vision of interconnected sacred spaces, not to create something new, but to help restore what has always existed, the web of sanctuaries that once covered the earth, the places where humans and nature existed in perfect harmony, where healing was as natural as breathing, where every soul could find the peace and wholeness that is their birthright. Elena felt a thrill of recognition as she understood the magnitude of what was being offered to her. She was being invited to participate in something far larger than her individual life, to become part of an ancient and ongoing work of restoration that had been carried forward by countless souls throughout history. The grove was not just offering her personal healing, but calling her to become an agent of healing for others, a keeper of the sacred knowledge that could help humanity remember its true relationship with the natural world. As this understanding deepened, the dream began to shift once again, and Elena found herself experiencing visions of possible futures, glimpses of what the world could become if enough souls answered the call to serve as bridges between human and natural consciousness. She saw cities where every building was covered with growing things, where the artificial and natural worlds had been woven together in perfect harmony. She saw schools where children learned as much from trees and plants as from books, where the wisdom of nature was honored alongside human knowledge. Most movingly, she saw healing centers that were modeled on places like the olive grove, sanctuaries, where people could come to remember their connection to the natural world, where the most advanced technology was combined with the most ancient wisdom to create environments of profound restoration and transformation. These centers were staffed by keepers like herself, people who had learned to serve as translators between human and natural consciousness, who could help others access the healing that was always available in the company of trees and plants and living soil. In one particularly vivid vision, Elena saw herself as an old woman, silver-haired and luminous, with the peace that comes from a lifetime of service, tending a grove that had grown from the seed she now carried. Around her, she saw others who had been called to the same path, people of all ages and backgrounds, who had learned to serve as guardians of sacred spaces, creating a network of sanctuaries that spanned the globe and provided refuge for anyone seeking to remember their true nature. The vision filled Elena with such joy and purpose that she felt as though her heart might burst with the intensity of it. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it, not just personal peace, but a way to serve something larger than herself, a calling that would give meaning and direction to every remaining day of her life. The grove was offering her not just healing, but transformation, not just rest, but a new identity as a servant of the forces of restoration and renewal. As the visions began to fade, and Elena felt herself being drawn back toward the surface of ordinary consciousness, Sophia appeared beside her one final time. "Remember," the ancient healer said, her words carrying the weight of eternal truth. "The grove you have experienced tonight exists not just in this physical location, but wherever love and intention create sacred space. Every tree you plant with the proper reverence becomes part of this network. Every soul you help to remember their connection to nature extends the grove's influence. Every moment you spend in communion with the natural world strengthens the web of healing that encircles the earth." Elena nodded, understanding that these were not just inspiring words, but practical instructions for the work that lay ahead. She was being given not just a calling, but the tools and knowledge needed to fulfill it. Not just a dream, but a roadmap for making that dream a reality in the physical world. "The seed you carry will guide you," Sophia continued, her form beginning to fade as Elena's consciousness prepared to return to ordinary awareness. "Trust its wisdom, follow its promptings, and plant it when the time is right. It will grow into a tree that carries the blessing of this grove to its new home. And around that tree, a new sanctuary will gradually form. Others will be drawn to the peace it offers, and they too will be called to serve the great work of healing and restoration." As Sophia's presence dissolved into the silver light of the dream grove, Elena felt herself sinking deeper into the most restful sleep she had ever known. The visions and teachings of the night had been profound, but now it was time for her consciousness to rest and integrate all that she had received. The ancient olive tree cradled her in its roots and branches like a cosmic cradle. The keeper's presence beside her served as a protective guardian, and the stars above continued their eternal dance of blessing and guidance. In the deepest part of her sleep, Elena dreamed the dreams of trees, slow, deep, patient dreams that moved with the rhythm of seasons rather than the frantic pace of human time. She dreamed of roots reaching deep into rich earth, of branches stretching toward life-giving sun, of the quiet satisfaction that comes from growing in perfect harmony with one's environment. She dreamed of the patient joy of providing shelter and sustenance for countless other beings, of the deep peace that comes from knowing one's place in the great web of existence. And in those tree dreams, Elena found the final piece of her transformation. She learned to think in tree time, to feel in tree rhythms, to trust in the tree wisdom that knew how to grow slowly and surely toward the light, while remaining deeply rooted in the nurturing darkness of the soil. When she finally woke, she would wake as someone who had learned to bridge human and natural consciousness, someone who could serve as a translator between the fast world of human urgency and the slow world of natural wisdom. Chapter 9: The Promise of Dawn. In the hour before dawn, when the night's deepest mysteries had been revealed and absorbed into the dreaming consciousness of all who rested beneath the olive trees, Elena found herself stirring gently from the most profound sleep of her life. She did not wake abruptly, as she was accustomed to doing in her ordinary life, but emerged gradually from the depths of sleep, like a flower opening its petals to greet the morning sun. Each layer of consciousness returning slowly and naturally to full awareness. The grove around her was hushed in that sacred moment that exists between night and day, when the world holds its breath in anticipation of the sun's return. The stars were beginning to fade in the lightening sky, not disappearing, but being absorbed into the growing luminescence of dawn, their light becoming part of the greater radiance that was slowly transforming the eastern horizon from deep blue to pale gold. The olive trees stood like silent sentinels in this transitional moment, their silver leaves barely stirring in the still air, their ancient presence serving as witnesses to the daily miracle of renewal that was about to unfold. Elena felt herself caught up in this sense of anticipation, but it was not the anxious anticipation that she had known in her former life, characterized by worry about what the day might bring or whether she would be adequate to meet its challenges. This was a different kind of expectation altogether, the peaceful anticipation of a seed about to sprout, of a bud about to open, of a soul about to be reborn into a fuller understanding of its own true nature. She felt poised on the threshold between who she had been and who she was becoming, aware that the night's experiences had fundamentally altered her at the deepest level of her being. The keeper was still beside her, but Elena could sense that he too was stirring from sleep, preparing to welcome the dawn in whatever way his long practice had taught him was most fitting. She watched as he opened his eyes that seemed to hold all the peace and wisdom of the grove itself, and smiled at her with the particular joy that comes from witnessing someone's successful passage through a night of profound transformation. "The grove has done its work well," he said softly, his voice blending naturally with the gentle sounds of the awakening world around them. "I can see in your eyes that you are no longer the same person who arrived here yesterday evening. The peace you sought has found you. But more than that, you have found your true calling, your place in the great work of healing that the earth so desperately needs." Elena nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonating in every cell of her body. She was indeed transformed, not through any dramatic external event, but through the gentle, persistent influence of the grove's ancient wisdom working upon her receptive consciousness throughout the long night. The anxiety and restlessness that had driven her to seek this place of sanctuary had been replaced by a deep sense of purpose and direction, a knowing that her life had meaning and value beyond anything she had previously imagined. The sacred seed still pulsed gently against her heart, and Elena found herself touching the pocket where it rested, feeling its warmth spread through her palm like a benediction. This small token of the grove's blessing had become the most precious possession she had ever owned, not because of any material value, but because it represented her connection to something eternal and sacred, her membership in the ancient community of souls who had devoted their lives to serving the healing of the world. "When will I know where to plant it?" she asked, her voice soft with wonder at the magnitude of the responsibility she had been given. The seed represented not just the potential for a new tree, but the possibility of creating another sanctuary, another node in the network of sacred spaces that could help humanity remember its true relationship with the natural world. The keeper smiled, his eyes twinkling with the same gentle humor that Elena had noticed in the trees themselves. "You will know," he assured her. "The seed carries its own wisdom, its own sense of timing and place. When you encounter the spot where it is meant to grow, you will feel it respond, feel it quicken with recognition and anticipation. Trust that response. Trust the guidance that comes from beyond your rational mind, and the seed will lead you to exactly the right place at exactly the right time." As he spoke, the first rays of the sun began to filter through the olive branches, transforming the grove into a cathedral of light and shadow that took Elena's breath away with its beauty. The silver leaves caught and reflected the golden sunlight, creating a dappled pattern of illumination that seemed to dance and flow like water across the ground. The air itself seemed to shimmer with blessing, and Elena felt as though she were witnessing the daily recreation of the world, the moment when the divine breath once again spoke life into existence. The sunrise in the olive grove was unlike any sunrise Elena had ever experienced. Instead of the harsh transition from darkness to light that characterized mornings in the city, this was a gradual unveiling, a gentle revelation that honored both the darkness that was ending and the light that was beginning. The trees seemed to glow from within as the sun's rays touched their leaves, and Elena understood that she was seeing them as they truly were beings of light and consciousness, temporarily wearing the garments of bark and leaf and branch. "This is the daily gift," the keeper said, his voice filled with the reverence of someone who had witnessed this miracle thousands of times, but had never lost his capacity for wonder. Every morning, the grove reminds us that no matter how dark the night may have been, no matter how difficult the journey, the light always returns. This is the promise that sustains all life, the knowing that endings are always followed by beginnings, that death is always followed by renewal, that every night of the soul eventually gives way to a new dawn. Elena felt this truth settling into her bones like medicine, healing old wounds of despair and hopelessness that she had carried for years without even realizing their weight. The grove was teaching her about more than just the cycle of day and night. It was revealing the fundamental pattern that governed all existence, the eternal dance of expansion and contraction, activity and rest, forgetting and remembering, that created the rhythm of all life. As the sun climbed higher and the grove filled with the warmth and energy of full daylight, Elena became aware of the sounds of awakening life all around her. Birds began their morning songs, not the harsh cries of urban environments, but the musical conversation of creatures who lived in harmony with their surroundings. Insects began their daily work of pollination and decomposition that kept the grove's ecosystem functioning in perfect balance. Even the trees themselves seemed to be stirring to more active life as their leaves turned toward the sun, and their sap began to flow more freely through their ancient vessels. But perhaps most beautiful of all was the way the grove's human visitors began to emerge from their own nights of rest and transformation. Elena could see them in the distance, other souls who had found their way to this sanctuary, each one carrying their own story of seeking and finding, each one blessed with their own unique gifts and calling. Some were beginning to stir from sleep beneath their chosen trees, while others were already moving slowly through the grove, their faces glowing with the same peace and purpose that Elena felt flowing through her own being. The keeper rose gracefully to his feet, his movements slow and deliberate, like someone who had learned that every gesture could be a form of prayer. "It is time for me to begin my morning rounds," he said, lifting his lamp even though its flame was no longer needed in the growing daylight. The trees like to be greeted as they wake, and there are always new visitors who need guidance in understanding what this place can offer them. Elena felt a pang of something that might have been sadness at the thought of the keeper leaving, but it was immediately replaced by a deeper understanding. The grove did not belong to any individual, not even to its devoted keeper. It was a gift that was meant to be shared, a blessing that grew stronger each time it was offered to a new soul. The keeper's departure was not an ending, but part of the natural flow of giving and receiving that kept the grove alive and vital. "Will I see you again?" she asked, though something in her already knew the answer. The keeper paused and looked back at her, his smile encompassing all the warmth and wisdom of the grove itself. "We are connected now," he said simply. "Through the seed you carry, through the network of consciousness that links all who serve the healing of the earth, through the grove that now lives within your own heart. Wherever you go, whatever you do, you carry part of this place with you, and it carries part of you. Distance and time cannot break such connections." With that, he walked away through the trees, his white linen shirt glowing in the morning sunlight, his bare feet making no sound on the carpet of fallen leaves. Elena watched until he disappeared among the olive branches, but she did not feel abandoned or alone. Instead, she felt held by something even larger and more loving than the keeper's individual presence. The collective consciousness of the grove itself, the ancient wisdom of the trees, the eternal network of love that connected all sacred places and all souls who had learned to serve the healing of the world. As the morning progressed, and Elena prepared to begin her own departure from the grove, she felt no sadness or reluctance to leave. She understood now that she was not really leaving at all, but extending the grove's influence into new territory, carrying its blessing to wherever she was called to serve. The physical grove would remain here, continuing its ancient work of healing and transformation. But she would carry its spiritual essence with her wherever she went, creating new sanctuaries and touching new lives with the peace and wisdom she had received. The sun was fully risen now, painting the grove in shades of gold and green that seemed to sing with joy and celebration. Elena rose slowly to her feet, feeling the strength and flexibility of a body that had been renewed by its night of rest in the company of ancient trees. She placed her hand one final time against the bark of the olive tree that had sheltered her, feeling its warm pulse of life and sending it her own pulse of gratitude in return. "Thank you," she whispered, knowing that her words were unnecessary, but wanting to offer them anyway. "Thank you for the gift of remembering who I truly am, for the calling you have given me, for the seed that will carry your blessing into the world. I promise to serve the work of healing with all my heart, to tend the sacred spaces wherever I find them, to help others remember their connection to the wisdom you have shared with me. The tree seemed to rustle its leaves in acknowledgement, and Elena felt a wave of blessing flow through her one final time, not as a farewell, but as a sending forth, a commissioning for the work that lay ahead. She was ready now to return to the world, but she would return as someone new, someone who carried within herself the peace of ancient places and the purpose of sacred service. Chapter 10: The Eternal Return. As Elena walked slowly back along the path that had brought her to the olive grove, each step seemed to carry her not away from the sanctuary she had discovered, but deeper into the understanding of what it truly meant to carry that sanctuary within herself. The morning sun cast long shadows through the ancient trees, and she found herself pausing frequently to look back at the grove, not out of reluctance to leave, but out of wonder at how different it appeared to her now, that she had been transformed by its gifts. Where yesterday she had seen simply a beautiful collection of old trees, she now perceived a living temple whose every element participated in the ongoing work of healing and awakening. The grove revealed itself to her transformed vision as a master class in the art of sacred space. Every tree precisely placed according to laws of harmony that went far deeper than human landscape design. Every shadow and patch of sunlight contributing to the perfect balance of energy that made healing possible. Every whisper of wind through the silver leaves carrying messages of comfort and guidance for any soul wise enough to listen. The path itself seemed different now, no longer just a route through the landscape, but a teacher in its own right. Elena noticed things she had missed on her arrival, small shrines created by other visitors, simple stacks of stones or arrangements of flowers that marked places where particular grace had been received. These humble offerings spoke of the countless souls who had walked this path before her, each one carrying away their own portion of the grove's blessing, each one leaving behind their own gift of gratitude. At one such shrine, Elena found herself pausing to add her own offering, not a physical object, but a prayer spoken from the depth of her transformed heart. She offered her gratitude for all she had received, her promise to serve the work of healing wherever she was called, and her commitment to help others find their way to the peace that was always available to any soul humble enough to seek it. As she spoke these words silently, she felt them being absorbed into the very substance of the path, becoming part of the blessing that would guide future pilgrims on their own journeys to the grove. The keeper had been right, she realized. She was not really leaving the grove, but extending its influence, carrying its peace and wisdom into new territory where they could take root and flourish. The sacred seed pulsing against her heart was both symbol and reality of this truth, a living connection to the source of all healing that would remain with her wherever her path might lead. As the path wound downward from the hilltop where the grove stood, Elena found herself entering a different quality of landscape, but one that no longer seemed separate from the sanctuary she had experienced. The wild herbs growing along the stone walls now revealed themselves as cousins to the healing plants that flourished among the olive trees. The ancient terraces spoke of the same patient human partnership with the land that had created and maintained the grove for centuries. Even the stones beneath her feet seemed to pulse with the same life force that flowed through the roots and branches of the sacred trees. This was perhaps the most profound gift the grove had given her, the understanding that the sacred was not confined to special places, but was the true nature of all existence, waiting to be recognized and honored wherever conscious beings were willing to see with eyes opened by love and reverence. The grove had not shown her something foreign to her ordinary life, but had revealed the extraordinary nature of the ordinary world she had always inhabited, but had never learned to truly see. The village at the base of the hill was awakening to the day's activities as Elena walked through its narrow streets. Shopkeepers were opening their doors. Children were running to school. Elderly residents were gathering in the small plaza to share coffee and conversation. But now Elena could see the sacred patterns that underlied these ordinary activities. The way the architecture of the village followed the natural contours of the land. The way the daily rhythms of human life echoed the larger cycles of the seasons. The way even the simplest interactions between neighbors carried the potential for healing and blessing when approached with the right awareness. In the bakery where she stopped for breakfast, Elena found herself in conversation with an elderly woman whose hands bore the calluses of a lifetime spent working in the olive groves without any conscious intention. Elena found herself sharing something of what she had experienced during her night beneath the ancient trees, and she watched with wonder as the woman's eyes lit up with recognition and understanding. "Ah, you have been to the sacred grove," the woman said, her voice carrying the same quality of reverence that Elena had heard in the keeper's words. "I knew it the moment you walked in. There is a light in your eyes that only comes from spending time with the ancient ones. They chose you for something special, didn't they? They always know when someone is ready to serve the old ways." Elena nodded, amazed at how naturally the conversation flowed. How easy it was to speak of her experience with someone who understood its significance. The woman, who introduced herself as Maria, had been born in the village and had spent her entire life working among the olive trees. learning their rhythms and receiving their wisdom through the patient practice of daily communion with their presence. The grove has always been sacred, Maria explained, as she wrapped fresh bread in paper for Elena to take on her journey. Even before the monastery was built there, even before the first olives were planted by human hands, that hill was known as a place where heaven and earth met, where souls could find healing and direction. My grandmother used to say that the land itself called the trees to grow there, that they came not by accident, but by divine invitation. As Elena listened to Maria's stories, she felt the web of connection that had been revealed to her in the grove extending to encompass this new friend, this keeper of local wisdom, who had spent her life in service to the same forces that had transformed Elena's understanding of her own purpose. She understood that she was being given yet another gift, the recognition that the work of healing and sanctuary was not the province of special individuals, but the calling of all who learned to live in harmony with the deeper patterns of existence. When Elena finally continued on her journey, carrying Maria's bread and blessing with her, she felt as though she were walking within a bubble of grace that transformed everything it touched. The landscape through which she moved revealed its sacred nature more clearly with each step. The way the morning light fell across the fields like a benediction, the way the wild flowers growing along the roadside created natural mandalas of color and form, the way even the most ordinary stones and trees seemed to pulse with the same life force that had spoken to her so clearly in the grove. By midday, Elena had reached the bus station in the larger town, where she would begin her journey back to her ordinary life. But she no longer thought of it as ordinary. Her apartment, her work, her daily routines, all of these would now be opportunities to practice the awareness she had gained, to serve the work of healing in whatever ways opened before her, to create sanctuary wherever she found herself called to dwell. As she waited for her bus, Elena found herself in conversation with other travelers, and she was amazed at how naturally opportunities arose to share something of the peace and wisdom she had received. A stressed mother struggling with crying children found her anxiety easing as Elena offered simple presence and understanding. An elderly man worried about upcoming surgery discovered unexpected comfort in Elena's quiet confidence that healing was always possible when one learned to align with the deeper forces of life. These were not dramatic interventions or miraculous healings, but the simple service of carrying peace into environments where it was needed, of being a living reminder that sanctuary was always available to those who knew how to recognize it. Elena understood that this was how the grove's influence spread, not through grand gestures or organized campaigns, but through the quiet transformation of individual souls, who then carried that transformation into every interaction, every relationship, every moment of their daily lives. When her bus finally arrived, Elena settled into her seat with a sense of deep contentment that had nothing to do with external circumstances, and everything to do with the unshakable peace that now resided at the center of her being. The sacred seed pulsed gently against her heart, reminding her that she carried within herself not just memory of the grove, but its living essence, ready to take root wherever the right conditions were found. As the bus pulled away from the station and began its journey through the countryside, Elena looked out the window at the passing landscape with eyes that had been forever changed by her night among the ancient olive trees. She saw not just fields and forests and villages, but a vast network of potential sanctuaries, places where the same healing she had experienced could be cultivated and shared. Every tree they passed seemed to nod in recognition. Every patch of wild land whispered of possibilities. Every garden and park revealed itself as a doorway to the same sacred realm she had discovered in the grove. The other passengers on the bus gradually settled into the drowsy rhythm of travel, many of them dozing in the warm afternoon sun that streamed through the windows. But Elena remained wakefully peaceful. Her consciousness expanded beyond the confines of the vehicle to encompass the entire landscape through which they moved. She felt herself traveling not just through physical space, but through the invisible web of connection that linked every sacred place on earth. Every soul that had ever found healing in the company of trees. Every keeper who had devoted their life to serving the ancient wisdom. As the hours passed and the bus carried her farther from the grove, Elena began to understand that distance was an illusion when it came to the connections she had made. The olive tree's presence seemed to grow stronger rather than weaker as she traveled, as if her movement through space was actually deepening her bond with the sanctuary rather than stretching it. The sacred seed against her heart pulsed with increasing warmth and vitality, and Elena realized that it was responding to the landscape they were passing through, sensing the places where its gifts might be most needed and welcomed. In the late afternoon, as the bus paused in a small city to pick up new passengers, Elena felt the seed give a particularly strong pulse of recognition. Looking out the window, she saw what appeared to be an abandoned lot in the heart of the urban landscape. A patch of bare earth surrounded by concrete and asphalt, forgotten by development and left to the mercy of weeds and litter. But Elena's transformed vision saw something entirely different. A perfect site for the sacred grove's influence to take root in new soil. A place where the healing power of trees could bring peace and renewal to an environment that desperately needed both. The understanding came not as a rational decision, but as a deep knowing that emanated from the seed itself. This was where she was meant to plant it, where the grove's blessing could take physical form in a place where it would serve the greatest good. Elena felt a thrill of recognition and purpose as she realized that her true journey was just beginning, that her experience in the olive grove had been not a destination, but a preparation for the real work that lay ahead. When the bus reached the city where she lived, a place that had seemed gray and lifeless when she had left it just days before, Elena saw it with completely new eyes. The urban landscape revealed its hidden potential for transformation, its countless opportunities for creating pockets of sanctuary amid the concrete and steel. Every neglected corner could become a garden. Every rooftop could host growing things. Every community space could be transformed into a place where souls could find the peace and connection that were their birthright. Elena made her way through the familiar streets with a sense of mission that was both urgent and patient, driven by purpose, but guided by the same unhurried wisdom she had learned from the olive trees. The seed in her pocket seemed to glow with anticipation as she walked, and she found herself taking roots she had never used before, guided by an inner compass that led her inevitably toward the abandoned lot she had glimpsed from the bus window. When she finally stood at the edge of the forgotten space, Elena felt the rightness of the moment with every fiber of her being. The lot was larger than it had appeared from the bus, nearly half an acre of neglected earth in the heart of the city, surrounded by apartment buildings whose residents rarely had access to green space or natural beauty. The soil was compacted and littered with debris, but Elena's trained perception could sense the life force that still pulsed beneath the surface, waiting for the right catalyst to awaken it to its full potential. As she stood there in the gathering dusk, Elena became aware that she was not alone. Other figures were moving through the neighborhood, residents returning from work, children playing in the streets, elderly people sitting on stoops and watching the world go by. And as they noticed her standing at the edge of the abandoned lot, several of them approached with the natural curiosity of people who lived in close community with each other, planning to do something with this old place. Asked a middle-aged man whose face bore the lines of someone who had spent years worrying about his neighborhood and dreaming of ways to make it better. It's been empty for 20 years, ever since they tore down the old factory that used to be here. The city keeps saying they'll develop it, but nothing ever happens. Elena smiled, feeling the same quality of natural connection she had experienced with Maria in the village bakery. "I'm thinking about a garden," she said, her words carrying the quiet certainty that came from aligning with forces far larger than individual will, a place where people could come to find peace, to connect with growing things, to remember what it feels like to be part of the natural world. The man's eyes lit up with interest, and Elena could see that her words had touched something deep in his own soul. The same longing for connection and sanctuary that had drawn her to the olive grove. Within minutes, other neighbors had joined the conversation, each one adding their own dreams and visions for what the space could become. There was the retired teacher who had always wanted a place to share her knowledge of herbs and medicinal plants. There was the young mother who dreamed of a safe, natural place where her children could play and learn. There was the elderly woman who remembered the victory gardens of her youth and longed to share that knowledge with a new generation. As the impromptu gathering grew and the conversation deepened, Elena felt the grove's influence expanding to encompass this entire community, touching each person who approached with the same quality of recognition and invitation she had experienced beneath the ancient olive trees. The sacred seed pulsed with increasing warmth against her heart, and she understood that this was how the work of transformation always happened, not through grand plans imposed from above, but through the organic coming together of souls who shared a common vision and were willing to serve something larger than their individual desires. By the time full darkness had fallen and the neighbors had finally dispersed to their evening routines, Elena had been invited into a dozen homes, had exchanged contact information with potential partners and supporters, and had been offered everything from seeds and tools to construction expertise and legal advice. The abandoned lot was no longer just a forgotten piece of urban waste, but the future site of a community garden that would serve as a sanctuary for anyone seeking the healing power of connection with growing things. That night, Elena slept more deeply than she had since her return from the grove. Her dreams filled with visions of the garden that would grow from the sacred seed she carried. She saw olive trees taking root in urban soil, their silver leaves catching city light and transforming it into something magical. She saw children learning to plant and tend, elderly people sharing wisdom and stories, stressed workers finding peace among the growing things during their lunch breaks. But more than anything, she saw the grove's true purpose being fulfilled, not to remain isolated on its hilltop, but to spread its influence wherever souls were ready to receive its gifts, creating a network of sanctuaries that would eventually span the globe and help humanity remember its true relationship with the natural world. In the weeks that followed, Elena threw herself into the work of manifesting the vision that had been born in that first evening conversation beside the abandoned lot. The community garden project grew with the same organic inevitability as the olive trees themselves, attracting supporters and resources in ways that seemed almost miraculous, but which Elena understood as simply the natural result of aligning with the deeper currents of life. The sacred seed remained unplanted during these weeks of preparation, but Elena could feel it growing stronger and more vital with each passing day, as if it were drawing energy from the community's shared intention and preparing itself for the moment when it would finally be placed in the earth. When that moment came, at the ceremonial groundbreaking that marked the official beginning of the garden project, Elena knew it with the same certainty she had felt about every major decision since her night in the grove, as she knelt in the center of what would become the garden's heart, surrounded by neighbors who had become partners in the work of transformation. Elena carefully removed the sacred seed from its place near her heart and placed it gently in the prepared soil. The moment her fingers released it into the earth, she felt a pulse of energy that seemed to flow not just through the immediate space, but out into the city and beyond, connecting this new sanctuary to the ancient olive grove and to every other sacred place where souls had learned to find healing in the company of growing things. The seed's planting marked not an ending, but a new beginning, the start of Elena's true work as a keeper of sacred spaces, a tender of sanctuaries, a bridge between the ancient wisdom of the natural world and the modern souls who had forgotten their connection to that wisdom. As she stood and brushed the soil from her hands, Elena felt the grove's blessing flowing through her and out into the world, carried by every person who would find peace in the garden that would grow from the sacred seed, spread by every soul who would learn to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, the sacred in the mundane, the eternal in the temporal. Epilogue, the Garden of Return. 1 year after Elena first planted the sacred seed in the heart of the city, she found herself standing once again in the olive grove where her transformation had begun. But this time, she did not come as a seeker in need of healing. She came as a fellow keeper, a guardian of sacred spaces who had learned to carry the grove's blessing wherever her path might lead. The ancient olive trees welcomed her return with the rustling of their silver leaves, and Elena felt the profound satisfaction that comes from having fulfilled a promise, from having served the work of transformation with dedication and love. The community garden that had grown from the sacred seed had exceeded even her most optimistic visions, becoming not just a place of beauty and productivity, but a true sanctuary where hundreds of souls had found the peace and connection they had been seeking without knowing how to name it. The olive tree from the grove now stood at the garden's center, grown from a sacred seed into a young but vigorous tree, whose silver leaves caught the city light and transformed it into something magical. Around it, vegetables and flowers grew in carefully tended beds, while paths wound through groves of fruit trees and healing herbs. Benches placed in strategic locations provided spaces for contemplation and rest, and a small pavilion served as a gathering place for the workshops and celebrations that had made the garden a true center of community life. But perhaps most important of all, the garden had become a training ground for other keepers, other souls who had discovered their own calling to serve the work of transformation. Elena had watched with joy as neighbors and volunteers gradually awakened to their own gifts and purposes, some going on to create new gardens in other parts of the city, others developing programs to bring the healing power of nature into schools and hospitals and workplaces. The keeper of the olive grove, who somehow seemed not to have aged a single day in the year since Elena had first met him, welcomed her return with the same gentle smile she remembered from that transformative night. They sat together beneath the ancient tree where her journey had begun, sharing stories of the work that had grown from that single sacred seed, marveling at the network of sanctuaries that was gradually spreading across the earth as more and more souls answered the call to serve the healing of the world. "You have learned the greatest secret," the keeper said, as they watched the sunset paint the grove in shades of gold and amber. "That the peace you sought was never something you needed to find, but something you needed to become. That the healing you received was never meant to be kept, but to be shared. That the sanctuary you discovered was never just a place, but a way of being that transforms every place it touches." Elena nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonating in every cell of her body. The olive grove had given her far more than she had ever imagined possible when she first walked the dusty path that led to its sanctuary. It had given her not just peace, but purpose, not just healing, but a calling, not just rest, but a new way of moving through the world that blessed everything it encountered. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky above the grove, Elena felt herself part of something eternal and unbreakable. The ancient lineage of souls who had learned to serve as bridges between heaven and earth, who had discovered their true purpose in helping others remember their connection to the sacred mystery that underlies all existence. The grove would continue its work long after she was gone, welcoming new seekers and transforming new lives, spreading its influence through the network of sanctuaries that were being created by all those who had learned to carry its wisdom into the world. In the deepest part of the night, as Elena rested once more against the ancient olive tree, she felt the presence of all those who had come before her, and all those who would come after, united in their dedication to the work of healing and transformation. The grove pulsed with this collective intention, this shared commitment to serving the highest good. And Elena understood that she was both student and teacher, both seeker and guide, both receiver and giver in the eternal dance of awakening. That was the true purpose of all existence. The silver leaves whispered their ancient stories in the night breeze, and Elena listened with the deep contentment of someone who had found her place in the great web of being. Someone who knew beyond doubt that her life had meaning and purpose. Someone who would carry the grove's blessing wherever she went for all the remaining days of her journey on earth. As sleep claimed her once more beneath the starlit canopy of the olive grove, Elena's last conscious thought was a prayer of gratitude for the trees that had taught her to see, for the keeper who had guided her awakening, for the sacred seed that had given her purpose, and for all the souls who would find their way to the sanctuaries that now existed, because someone had been willing to plant seeds of transformation in the fertile soil of love and intention. The grove settled into its ancient rhythm of peace and blessing, holding space for all who would come seeking what Elena had found, ready to offer its gifts to any soul humble enough to receive them. Patient as only trees can be patient, loving as only the earth itself knows how to love, eternal as the dance of stars across the infinite sky, and in gardens and groves and sanctuaries around the world. Other seeds planted by other keepers were taking root and growing toward the light, creating a network of healing that would eventually transform the earth itself into the sanctuary it had always been meant to be, a place where every soul could find the peace and wholeness that was their birthright, where heaven and earth met in every breath, where love was the only law that mattered and healing was as natural as the rising and setting of the sun.